Morning, everybody. Chris here. Welcome back to 30-Day Excel Analyst, the program where we're trying to transform your analytical skill set in 30 days. This is day 19. This is automation week. If you're watching live, leave me a comment in the chat. I'll deal with those at the end. If you're watching on replay, thank you for being with us too. Leave me a comment below the video. I will get back to you there. I will help you get as much value as you can out of the 30-Day Excel Analyst program. So, with that said, into today's materials, we're dealing with automation week. Now, automation, of course, is the process of implementing Excel VBA into your spreadsheets in order to automate, to speed up those manual processes, whatever it might be, moving data around, moving data from one sheet to another, getting data into a particular format, whatever it might be, we can automate that with Excel VBA. So far this week, we've learned about the basics of Excel VBA. We've also done a more practical thing. So we've used a macro recorder to record some code, and we've been able to sort some code at the click of a button. So we're just beginning to feel the power of Excel VBA and how we might automate things in Excel. So today, we're going to go through 5 beginner techniques. So we're kind of working on 2 tracks here. We're working on the macro recorder track. So remember, we've got 3 sources of code. We've got organic code, recycled code, and recorded code. So we've got a big chunk of recorded code. We're just making tweaks to it by introducing some of that organic code, what we call organic code, which is code that you write yourself. And today we're going to focus more on that organic code and the 5 essential skills that the Excel VBA beginner needs to get into Excel VBA. We're going to work through these one by one using yesterday's example, and we're going to implement some examples into the VBA editor. So with that said, there's going to be lots to do today. So let's get into it. I'm going to open the Visual Basic editor, and then we're going to go ahead and create our, 2-screen setup there, although I'm using a single screen here. It's really important you're able to see Excel and see the VBA editor at the same time. I highly recommend a multiple screen setup. If you can do it, it doesn't cost much. You can get a screen, an additional screen secondhand. I highly recommend it for Excel VBA learning. So let's get into our first skill area. Our first technique is working with cells. Absolutely have to be able to do this with Excel VBA. You have to be able to input values to the spreadsheet, and you have to be able to read values off the spreadsheet too. So we're going to stay in the same module here. You can remember we previously recorded this code, so Excel automatically created a routine, a macro in the VBA editor. We can also do this organically. Today's focus is more organic, and we're going to do something really weird and abstract to begin with. We're going to put option explicit at the top of the module. We're going to come back to it later why we do that. So we're going to create our own macro here. I'm going to call this write to cells. Write to cells. So we always try to give an informative name to a macro. So the name of the macro describes what the macro does, and macro name has to be a single word. That's why we've got the underscores in there. So we know we need to interact with cells. So what are some ways that we could input a value to a cell? Well, we know a little bit about that because we did a little bit of it yesterday. So let's start with this basic syntax. I'm just going to write my name into this cell. You can do whatever you like. Choose any cell, write whatever you like in there. Play and experimentation is absolutely key. That's how you get better at Excel VBA. So I'm going to say range. I'm in cell E9 here. I'm just going to say equals. I'm going to say 30 DEA, 30-day Excel Analyst there. So now we can play. What happens when we play this code? And then let's tweak it. Let's try to improve it there. So there you go. 30 DEA in there. Let's put something else in here. So now I'm just giving you an example of how you can play and improve stuff. You've got to do this. You've got to do this yourself to improve the skill. So this is the basic idea, writing to the spreadsheet, and this is the basic syntax I recommend. Also got some other options to be aware of, but I don't necessarily recommend. You've got active cell here. So I'm going to say active cell equals Luna. I've got Luna the dog down here next to me. Then I'm just going to comment out. I'm going to put an inverted comma here on the first line of code just because I want to ignore it for now. So what's going to happen now? I can hit play and I can see in the active cell, Luna's name is appearing there. So this is something to be aware of. I don't necessarily recommend this. This is what we'd call a direct referencing approach because we're actually putting something into the active cell. But we don't need to do that because we can use what you'd call an indirect referencing approach. So here, it doesn't matter which cell is active. We're going to put a value into E9 there. So active cell, just something to be aware of, not something I would necessarily recommend. So range E9 here. So this is our basic referencing technique. We can also reference sheets this way. So I've got sheet 1. And just to give you a sense of how this indirect referencing technique can work, I'm going to use a sheet reference as well. I'm going to say sheets, and then the name of the sheet here, sheets, sheet 1 dot range A1 here, equals, you can write in whatever you like there. So once again, indirect referencing. I'm not even on this sheet. You can see I'm on the walk data sheet here. I'm not even on sheet 1. I'm going to go ahead and play this routine. And I can go to sheet 1 and I can see the value has gone in there. So just beginning to feel the power, aren't we? Just beginning to feel the power a little bit of Excel VBA referencing across sheets. You could also reference different files, of course. We're not going to go that far, but that's also possible. Anything's really possible with VBA. You could go ahead and open a file, do all kinds of things. So just going to comment out these two. At this point, we want to be aware of the dot cells referencing technique. Now, we don't need dots to begin with. If we just say cells, it's going to write on the active sheet. We can also put a sheet name in front. We'll do that in just a second. So I'm going to say cells 1, 1. Now, you can say dot value for completeness. However, you don't need to use dot value because it's what's called the default property, So Excel will assume you're talking about the value of the cell. If you don't say anything, we can go ahead and say cells 1, 1. Let's play this one. I'm going to hit the F5 key on Windows PC, and we can see hello going in there. So you might say, Chris, well, it's just doing the same thing. I prefer this referencing technique, and this is the one I use most of the time. However, cells present some unique possibilities because we're using numbers here. We're used to using numbers to referencing rows, which is the first part. Rows is the first part of the dot cells technique here, but we can also use numbers to reference columns here. That's pretty cool. So if I change this to 5, what's going to happen now? Doing experimentation now. Can you stop the video and guess what's going to happen now? I can see in cell E1, which is the 5th column, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns across, and 1 row down. You can see we've got hello in there. So we're using numbers to reference columns. That helps later when we get to more dynamic and powerful position control. That's just a really helpful thing to be able to do. So we're dealing with writing to the spreadsheet. You've seen various different techniques there just to show you how you might combine dot cells with a sheet name. So I'm going to say sheets, sheet 1 here, dot cells 1, 5. So what's going to happen here? Going to hit play. Nothing's happened on this sheet. That's because we've referenced, of course, the other sheet. I'm going to go to sheet 1, and you can see hello has appeared here. Just to consolidate this, let's put something else in here. In fact, let's go for something a bit more advanced. Let's say take the value from A1 on the walk data sheet and put it into cell E1 effectively on sheet 1. So how to do that? Let's say type in walk data here, dot range A1. So very insightful, hopefully, combination of referencing techniques there. We've got the standard referencing techniques we've used, and we've got the dot cells referencing technique. Also an example of what we call the A equals B concept. We've got A and B around the equals sign, and then whatever A is will become whatever B is. A will take on the value of B. I'm going to hit the F5 key and play this. So if I now go to sheet 1, I can see on cells 1, 5, sheet 1. So cell E1, it says it's taken the value from A1 on the other sheet in the file. So I'm just going to change this to Chris here. Let's get rid of me for a second. So I'm on the work data sheet here, and we're going to go over to sheet 1, play this macro. What's going to happen? And we can see Chris appearing in this cell here. So interacting with cells in the file, and these are the basics. So we've been writing stuff to the sheet. What about getting information from the sheet? This is the other part of interacting with cells. So I'm just going to say message box range A1 here. So you can see we're not putting information into the spreadsheet. We're extracting information from the spreadsheet here. So I'm just going to hit play. What's going to happen? We can see in the message box, Chris flashing up there. So whatever is in cell A1 is going to flash up into this message box. And this is, working things the other way, if you like, rather than writing to the spreadsheet, we're reading from the spreadsheet here. Okay, so we can get a value to appear in a message box. Not particularly useful. So can we do something a bit more advanced? Let's say variable test here. Okay, so let's get into variables. Variables, our second key skill area in Excel VBA. Working with variables, how should we think about a variable? It's simply a place to store some information. I compare it to a cell in the spreadsheet. We can store some information in a cell. We can also store information in a variable. The difference is that we can't see a variable. It only exists in Excel's memory. So I'm going to go ahead and say dim. Let's say name store here as string. So we're using a string variable here. Yesterday, we used an integer variable because we wanted to store a number. So this setup is what we have. If we want to create a variable, which is just a place to store information in Excel's memory, we've got to give it a name, give it an informative name. It has to be a single word. I've used the underscore there. And then we're saying to Excel, this is the type. This is the type of data that we want to store. And a string is text data. Other common variable types, we've got integer here, which is a single whole number, and a Boolean variable takes a value of true or false. A double variable allows us to store decimals. There's 5 to 10 variables that are common, but start with the string and integer variables. That's more than enough to get started. So I want to get a value from the spreadsheet. I'm going to say name store here. So name store equals range A1. So what's going to happen now? You might want to stop the video. What's going to happen? Well, because we're using a variable, I'm going to play this macro. So you can see the cursor flashing in the routine. I'm going to play the macro. Because we're using a variable, nothing's actually happening. That's the abstract nature of variables. They just live in Excel's memory. I'm going to hit the F8 key this time. This might be a bit more illuminating, help us to understand what's going on. So I'm stepping through the code. You can also go to debug and step into. When the line of code is highlighted, it means it hasn't executed yet. So we can hit the F8 key and now just hover the cursor over the variable there. And we can see the value in the cursor is being flashed up by the VBA editor. So I can see there is a value in this variable. Okay. So maybe not super interesting. So let's try to do a more kind of practical example. I'm going to say variable test2 here. Okay, and let's see if we can add up 2 numbers using variables here. Add up 2 numbers. So we're going to need 2 variables to do that. I'm going to say number 1 as what kind of variable type would be appropriate here. Well, it depends on the nature of your data, but I'm going to use integer variable here because I'm going to assume that we're working with whole numbers. Now, what do I want to do? I want to be able to put 2 numbers into cells and then for Excel to add up these 2 numbers. Now, we could do this obviously using a formula in a very straightforward way. I'm not saying that you should do this kind of simple arithmetic calculation in VBA necessarily, but it's just a nice example for us to do. So we need to get values out of the spreadsheet into VBA's memory. So how to do that? Well, it's another A equals B operation. So number 1 equals range E11 here. And then number 2 equals range, and this is going to be E12, of course. Now, I've made a deliberate mistake here. I'm going to hit the F5 key. We're going to see what happens, right? It says variable not defined, variable not defined. So when we're using variables, we've got to be accurate with spelling. Yeah, got to be accurate with spelling. Otherwise, Excel's not going to know quite what we're talking about. Now, can you remember at the beginning of the stream, we wrote option explicit at the top here. Option explicit ends it means that you're insisting that Excel checks the variables, checks the spelling of the variables for any inaccuracies before it tries to do anything with the VBA code. So it can save you a huge amount of time trying to do debugging. That's exactly what it did there. So Excel's saying, I don't know what you're referring to here. Variable not defined, absolutely. We just need a 0 in there. Okay, so this should be getting the values into the variables. I'm going to hit the F8 key, step through again. And number 1, we've got a value of 1. Number 2, we do have a value of 3. So once again, just hovering the cursor over the variable there to be able to understand the value in the variable. Okay, so we've got the values into the variables. Now we want to do an operation. We're going to do that in VBA, in the VBA editor. I'm going to say number total. And we're going to have another integer variable here. Then how are we going to add together these numbers in VBA? Well, it's another operation that's similar to the A equals B operation. So number total equals number 1 plus number 2 here. So we've got numbers in those variables. We're able to manipulate those variables by, in this case, we want to add them together. There's any number of things that we might want to do with these variables, of course. Variables, more abstract, difficult to get your head around, but you can see very easy to manipulate, and we can just manipulate them in the VBA editor. So actually much more efficient than trying, to write values to a spreadsheet. We can just do things in VBA's memory and do them very efficiently. That doesn't mean you should do them in VBA, of course, because most of the time you'll want to be able to see the calculations and see what's going on. Then I'm going to say message box, number total here. So we've got message box and a variable name. What's going to happen here? Well, we're used to having speech marks around the text. That would show us the text. Because we want the value in the variable to flash up, we don't use the speech marks. Message box and then variable name. That's going to flash up the value held in the variable here. So we're going to play this, and we've got a value of 4. So what's happened? Well, Excel has taken 1, put it into number 1 variable, taken 3, put it into the number 2 variable, added them up, and then externalized that total in the message box there. How cool is that? Let's try a different value here. So in the spreadsheet, I'm just going to put 10 in, and then we can hit play, and you can see 13 flashing up there. Cool. Could we quickly write the value to the spreadsheet? So in E14, I'm going to write the sum in, and I'm going to say the sum is, and then using the ampersand, I'm going to say number total here. So this is another very common construct in VBA. We've got a text string, and you can see it's a text string because it's got the speech marks around it being connected to concatenating with a variable. And you can see we want the value of the variable to be displayed, so we don't need speech marks. You never put speech marks around variables. That would just display the text. We want to display the value in the variable here. So clicking the macro once again, hitting play, and we can see we're still got our message box, and then we can see the sum is 13 flashing up there. Pretty cool. So we're dealing with interacting with cells, dealing with variables. What else have we got? What else are we going to cover today? So position control. We've also got some conditionality here. So I think we should deal with conditionality first. So going back to our spreadsheet, we dealt with conditionality briefly yesterday. So you can see we've got our if statement here. How might we integrate some conditionality here? Well, let's suppose we want to know if the sum is more than 10, then we want to know that. If the sum is less than 10, then we want to know that as well. Once again, a little bit contrived. I totally acknowledge this, but this is teaching you the structures you need to know to do real world stuff. So we're going to say if number total, our variable name, is less than 10, we're going to have a message box flashing up. Message box, the total is less than 10 here. And then if that's not the case, we're going to flash up and say the total is 10 or more. Or more, and that of course should be in a message box here. So MSG box at the beginning there. Okay. So what's going to happen here? Now, let's just pay attention to the type of conditional statement there. Yesterday, we were using what I'd call a simple one-line conditional statement there. So that means if something is happening, this is the condition, then we're going to go to there. If that condition is not met, if it's not happening, then very simply, we're not going to get to this part of the code at all. So this isn't going to happen. So this if statement is the next level of sophistication, because we can say if this is happening, the condition as we set out there, then we're going to do this. If it isn't happening, then we're going to go and do this instead. So we're sending the code one of two different ways. If, else, end if is once again an absolute staple of Excel VBA programming. So what's going to happen now? Well, I'm going to comment out our, it should be okay actually. I'm just going to hit the play button and the total is 10 or more. That seems to be accurate. So if I change this to 2, what's going to happen? I'm going to hit play and then it's going to say the total is less than 10. Now on a message box, to get rid of this might be annoying, Microsoft Excel taking all the credit there, we can go comma in our message box 0, which is the message box type, and then you can decide what text displays in that message box title there. So I can just display total here. Let's do it one more time. It says the total is less than 10. And one more time, let's increase the total. So now we can see the total is 10 or more. Okay, pretty cool. Right, finally, talking about conditionality, we've got a simple conditional statement and we've got the if, else, end if conditional statement. Let's very quickly talk about select case here. So I'm going to say select case, just going to comment out actually. Let's comment out the previous conditional statement here. Going to say select case. So we've done a simple one-line conditional statement. We've done the if, else, end if conditional statement. Now, what if you wanted your code to go one of multiple ways? Could be any number of ways with select case. Then you use select case. Now, select case, this is the syntax here. So I'm going to say case is equals 1, case is equals 2, case is, can I say this, more than 2? We're going to see. Okay. Anyway, once again, a little bit contrived, but this is the syntax you need. So we say select case, and then we say what we want Excel to look at. This could be a range in the spreadsheet, often is a variable, and then we're giving different values for that variable and the things that we want Excel to do if the variable is one of those values. So case is 1, we're just going to flash up a message box and say the total is 1. Okay, case is 2, we're going to flash up the message box rather and say the total is 2. In case is more than 2, we're going to flash up the message box and say the total is more than 2. Here we are. Right, so this is select case. This is more advanced conditionality where you want the code to go one of multiple different ways. So if we just have 0 and 1 here, we'd expect our number total to be 1. So we're going to go here, hit play, and we can say, see, the total is 1 there. So what if we change this to 2? Play, click in the routine and play again. The total is 2. And what if it's more than 2? Click in the routine, play one more time, and we can see the total is more than 2 there. Okay. So what about that? So very, fast demonstration. very quick demonstration today, but we can see, well, we've done a lot of on working with cells. So we've managed to write to the spreadsheet, get information from the spreadsheet using the basic syntax and using cells. We've worked with variables. We've got a value into a variable. We've performed an operation with variables by adding them together. And then we've got a value out of a variable. We've put a value into the spreadsheet. We just used integer variables today. Also, string and Boolean. Boolean are two variables to also look at. And then we looked at conditionality too. So if else, end if, and select case. If for that simple conditional statement, if something's happening, then do this. If else and end if we want to go two different ways, select case allows us to go multiple ways. So this is our toolkits, guys. 5 essential Excel VBA techniques. And in tomorrow's session, we will get on to controlling position and implementing loops. We'll go back to our example that we looked at yesterday of sorting data. We'll try to do something a little bit more advanced, including position control and including loops, and that's going to bring everything together. These 5 Excel VBA essential beginner techniques, the 5 things you really have to know in Excel VBA. So pretty much concludes today's sessions. Pretty much concludes today's session, guys. I will put the file that I created. I will put that with today's resources. All the resources for a 30-day Excel Analyst are, of course, available for you to use. You can hit the link in the video description below to go and find those resources. I'll put today's file up there too. So let's get into the chat. So thank you so much to the live squad. How's everybody doing? I hope you've been working along with me this morning. Heavy Downpour, how are you doing? Good to see you. So Heavy Downpour saying Windows 11 with update is Windows 11 update with Copilot is cool. Copilot. So is this an AI kind of assistant? I've heard a bit about it, but maybe I should look into it. Heavy Downpour. Thank you for being with us. Welcome to Arnie. How are you doing? Kieran tuning in too. How are you doing, Kieran? Jim tuning in, how's it going? Marek tuning in, how are you? And Maz tuning in at the bottom. Always appreciate you at the end, Maz. You always say, you always give us some positive feedback at the end. And Jim saying, absolutely a great refresher course. Good job. Really appreciate it, Jim. Yeah, the idea of 30-day Excel Analyst is, yeah, we don't go into a huge amount of depth. Rather, we cover all the territory. We give you an overview. Then it's up to you to go ahead and take things to the next level. And with VBA, clearly with VBA, you're going to have to go into more detail in terms of, to really get to the level that you'll be able to. What the hell am I saying? What I'm saying is you're going to have to do more work with VBA for it to have an impact in your day-to-day consulting work. Clearly, I hope that's kind of implicit in what we're doing here. But we've got all the resources you need. Seriously, if you like my teaching style, you like the way you do things here, you're going to love these series. 30-day Excel Analyst playlist is the current program, of course, 30 for 30. So if you like the 30-minute format, we've got 30-minute videos about learning Excel VBA. We've got our 5-hour walkthrough project that I did a couple of months ago. So whatever your learning style is, whether you want to learn in 5-minute chunks, 30-minute chunks, 5-hour chunks, check out those links in the video description below, guys. Excel VBA is a skill. The only way to get better is to practice. Without practicing, you're not going to get any better. With practice, you can only get better. Yeah. As long as you can commit to it and apply those meta skills to work through the difficult times, debugging, critical consumption, getting the right mindset. As long as you can do those things and you spend time with VBA, you are going to get better. I'm just getting you started here on 30-day Excel Analyst. So to the live squad, thank you so much for watching. If you're watching a replay, leave me a comment below. I'll get back to you there and I'll see you same time, same place tomorrow. If you're watching live, 10 o'clock UK time. If not, I'll see you in the next video. Take care.